The boardroom on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over downtown Chicago, and, on a clear morning in October, you could see all the way to the lake. The kind of view that reminded people where they stood in the world, or thought they stood. That morning, 13 people sat around a glass table that cost more than most Americans made in a year. 12 of them wore suits. The 13th was wearing a faded grey Henley, dark jeans, and a pair of worn New Balance sneakers that had seen better days. He was sitting at the far end of the table, not the head, with a paper coffee cup from the lobby cafe, and a legal pad that had maybe 6 words written on it. He looked like someone's assistant who had wandered into the wrong meeting. His name was Eli Navarro. He was 38 years old, and he owned the building. Not just the building. He owned Navarro Capital Group, a private equity firm that had quietly become one of the most influential financial institutions in the Midwest over the past decade. He owned a 34% stake in Meridian Biotech, the company whose name was on the lobby directory. He had turned a $40,000 inheritance from his grandmother into a portfolio that Forbes had recently estimated at just under $2 billion, though Eli had never confirmed or denied that number. He didn't own a yacht. He didn't go to galas. He drove a 7-year-old Subaru and made his own lunch most days. His LinkedIn profile listed his occupation simply as investor. The 12 people in suits worked for Hargrove Vance Partners, one of the largest institutional investment firms in the country, and they had flown in from New York specifically for this meeting. Their lead partner, a man named Preston Whitfield, 51, silver-haired and impeccably tailored, had been in rooms like this his entire career. He was the kind of man who filled a room just by standing in it. He had closed deals worth hundreds of millions. He had a framed photo on his desk of himself shaking hands with a former Treasury Secretary. He had no idea who Eli Navarro was. That was not entirely his fault. Eli had specifically asked his assistant, a sharp young woman named Renata, not to send the usual briefing package to visiting parties. No headshot, no bio, no pre-read. He did this sometimes for reasons that only became obvious later. Preston Whitfield had shaken everyone's hand when he entered the room. He had done it the way people do when they're performing confidence. Firm grip, eye contact. Name repeated back, the whole thing. When he got to Eli, he paused for half a second, looked at the Henley, looked at the sneakers, and extended his hand with the particular brand of warmth that people reserve for people they've already categorized as unimportant. "Preston Whitfield," he said, "you must be with the facilities team." The woman, to Eli's left, a senior analyst named Margot Chen, pressed her lips together very carefully and said nothing. Eli shook Preston's hand. "Ellie," he said. "Just Eli. No correction, no clarification." He gestured toward the empty seat across from him. "Please sit down." Preston sat. He began organizing his materials. He had a presentation, 46 slides, printed and bound in a navy folder with the Hargrove Vance logo embossed in gold. His associates began distributing copies around the table. One landed in front of Eli. He didn't open it. The meeting was supposed to be about a proposed acquisition. Hargrove Vance had spent 8 months pursuing a company called LightPath Medical, a mid-sized medical device manufacturer based in Indianapolis. They had built a case, run the numbers, secured preliminary financing, and were now looking for co-investors to come in at the final stage. They had reached out to Navarro Capital through a mutual contact and been told that the principal might be interested. The contact had said the principal was not what you'd expect. Whitfield had taken that to mean unsophisticated, easier to manage. He began his presentation with the practiced energy of a man who had given this kind of pitch many times. He was good at it, genuinely good. He knew how to read a room, how to hold attention, when to slow down, and when to push forward. He spoke about LightPath's market position, their patent portfolio, their distribution agreements with 3 of the top hospital systems in the country. Eli listened with his elbows on the table and his chin resting in one hand. His legal pad stayed mostly blank. He asked no questions for the first 20 minutes. One of Preston's associates, a young man named Bradley, glanced at him twice during that stretch, with an expression that said he wasn't sure whether the facilities guy understood what was being discussed. At minute 23, Eli picked up his pen. "Can you go back to slide 11, he said. Preston stopped mid-sentence. He flipped back. Slide 11 was a summary of LightPath's existing debt structure, the kind of slide that most people's eyes slide right past because it's dense and dry and full of small numbers. "The convertible note," Eli said. "The one that matures in February. What's the conversion price?" A small silence settled over the room. Preston looked at his associate, a CFO type named Harrison, who handled the technical details. Harrison opened his laptop. He typed for a moment. He frowned slightly. $7.40 per share, Harrison said, and LightPath is currently trading at $6.18, said Harrison. So, when that note converts in February, Eli said, looking not at Preston but at the middle of the table, as if he were just thinking out loud. Assuming the stock doesn't recover, the note holders are going to force conversion at below market rate, which means, roughly, he paused, did the math quietly in his head, 11.2% dilution to existing shareholders before you've even closed the deal. That's not in your slides. The room had a quality of silence that's different from ordinary silence. It was the kind that comes when people are recalibrating. Preston Whitfield's expression didn't change, exactly, but something shifted behind his eyes. He looked at Eli the way you look at a door that you thought was a wall. "That's a nuance we've been tracking," Preston said carefully. "Is it in your model?" Eli asked, still calm, still quiet. Harrison's typing had stopped. We've accounted for it," Preston said. "Can I see the cap table assumption as of Q1 next year?" Eli asked. "Post-conversion." Another pause. Harrison began typing faster. Margot Chen, beside Eli, had stopped pretending to look at her own copy of the presentation. "We can get you that number by end of day," Harrison said. "That's all right," Eli said. He picked up his legal pad. He wrote something down, turned it around, and slid it across the table toward Harrison. On the pad was a number, 847,300,000. "That's roughly what the enterprise value looks like post-dilution," Eli said, "which means you're actually paying about 12 times EBITDA, not 9.4. And at 12 times, the return profile doesn't work. Not at the interest rate environment we're in right now." There was a long moment where nobody moved. Bradley, the young associate, was staring at the legal pad like it was a magic trick. Preston Whitfield set down his bound presentation. He leaned back very slightly in his chair. The performance had gone out of him, the practiced energy, the room-filling confidence. What replaced it wasn't embarrassment exactly. He was too experienced for that. But it was something in that family. A reconsideration. "You've looked at LightPath before," he said. It wasn't entirely a question. 18 months ago, Eli said. "We passed." He picked up his coffee cup, found it empty, and set it back down. The note structure was the reason. Preston was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Who are you, exactly?" It was a sincere question. The facilities guy assumption had dissolved completely, and in its place was genuine bewilderment. He looked at Margot Chen, who looked at the table. He looked at Harrison, who suddenly seemed very interested in his laptop screen. Eli didn't answer right away. He reached into the back of his legal pad and pulled out a single business card. Plain white, no logo, just his name and a phone number, and set it on the table. "Eli Navarro," he said. "I own this building." He let that sit for 1 second. "And I think there's actually a deal here," he continued, "but not the one you came in with. If you're willing to restructure around the note maturity, buy the debt out before February, force a negotiated conversion at a fixed rate, then close, you can probably get the enterprise value back down to a number that makes sense for both parties." He turned the legal pad to a clean page and started writing. It would look something like this. For the next 40 minutes, Eli Navarro rewrote the deal. Not rudely, not with any visible sense of triumph. He did it the way a craftsman works, methodically, precisely, without looking for applause. He acknowledged what Hargrove Vance had done right, which was considerable. He identified the two places where the structure was going to create problems, and he proposed a path that actually worked. Preston Whitfield asked questions. Good ones. The kind that told Eli this man knew his craft, even when he'd walked in, thinking he was the only one in the room who did. By the end, the two of them were talking the way people talk when they've found a mutual frequency. Fast, direct, finishing each other's sentences across the glass table. Bradley, the young associate, had long since put down his pen and was just watching. Before the meeting broke, Preston said something that he clearly meant as a compliment, but that landed oddly in the room. I have to be honest with you, Eli. I almost didn't take you seriously when you walked in. Ellie looked at him for a moment. Not cold, not warm, even. I know, he said. Most people don't. He stood, shook Preston's hand, shook everyone else's hand in turn. He picked up his paper coffee cup and his legal pad. He was almost at the door when Preston called after him. Can I ask? The shoes. The Henley. Is it a strategy? Ellie turned around. For the first time that morning, something crossed his face that might have been a smile. Small, unhurried. My grandmother used to say, the people who judge your shoes before they hear your words are telling you something important about themselves, he said. I find it useful information. Then he walked out. What happened next took 3 weeks and involved 7 phone calls, 2 in-person meetings, a renegotiated term sheet, and 1 very tense conversation with Lightpath Medical's board, who had not been thrilled about the note situation being surfaced by an outside party. But the deal closed. At a valuation that worked, Preston Whitfield sent Eli a bottle of bourbon afterward with a handwritten note that said simply, Next time I'll read the room better. Eli kept the note. He put it in a drawer in his office, alongside a handful of other things he kept not as trophies but as reminders. A parking ticket from the year he was sleeping on his cousin's couch trying to make payroll at his first fund. A photograph of his grandmother at her kitchen table. A rejection letter from a bank that had declined to give him a $50,000 loan when he was 25 on the grounds that he lacked sufficient assets. He had bought that bank 4 years ago, not out of spite. It had been a sound acquisition, but he kept the letter. His assistant Renata had worked for him for 6 years. She knew about the Henley strategy, as the office had taken to calling it, though Eli himself never named it anything. She had watched him walk into rooms where people handed him parking validation slips, where hotel concierges spoke to the person beside him instead of him, where fellow passengers on planes tried to explain to him what private equity was. She had watched him absorb all of it, quietly, without visible irritation, and then proceed to demonstrate with complete cars exactly who he was. She asked him about it once. He thought about it for a long moment before answering. When someone shows you their assumptions, he said, they're giving you a gift. You know exactly what they think the world looks like, and that tells you almost everything you need to know about how they'll behave. He paused. People who can't see past a Henley make predictable decisions. In this business, predictable is the most dangerous thing you can be. Renata had written that down. She still had it somewhere. The Hargrove Vance deal was not the last time something like this happened. It was not even the most dramatic. That distinction probably belonged to the Tuesday afternoon in April, 2 years earlier, when Eli had been sitting in the waiting area of Cascade Regional Medical Center in Naperville, Illinois, waiting to hear about his father. His father, Leon Navarro, 71, had been admitted that morning after a cardiac event that turned out to be less severe than initially feared. A significant arrhythmia, not a full infarction, but serious enough that the doctors wanted to keep him for observation and run additional tests. Eli had driven there straight from a breakfast meeting and had been sitting in the third-floor waiting area for going on 3 hours, still in his weekend clothes. Dark jeans, a quarter-zip pullover in faded navy, with his phone in his hand, and a half-eaten bag of pretzels from the vending machine on the chair beside him. He was not visibly distressed. Eli Navarro was not a visibly distressed kind of person, but anyone paying attention would have noticed that he hadn't looked at his phone in 40 minutes, which was unusual for him, and that he was watching the hallway with the careful stillness of a man doing everything he could to project calm he wasn't entirely feeling. The floor administrator, a woman named Lynette Burke, 44, had been at Cascade Regional for 11 years. She was efficient, professional, and operated her floor with the kind of quiet authority that came from knowing exactly how every system in the building worked and who to call when they didn't. She was also, at that particular moment, dealing with a cascading set of administrative problems that had begun at 7 in the morning and showed no signs of resolution. The hospital was in the middle of a billing system transition. The new software, purchased by the administration 18 months ago at considerable expense, was not integrating properly with the insurance verification system. Claims were getting stuck. Pre-authorizations were failing. Patients were being told their coverage couldn't be confirmed when in fact it could. The software vendor's support line had a 4-hour hold time. The hospital's IT department had been working on it for 6 weeks without a solution. The administration had called in a consulting firm 2 months ago, and the consulting firm had produced a 200-page report and an invoice for $340,000 and had not fixed anything. Lynette had been fielding complaints about this all morning. She had escalated it to her supervisor. Her supervisor had escalated it to the COO. The COO had said they were working on it. Meanwhile, 3 patients that morning had nearly been sent home without proper discharge documentation because of a verification error that nobody could trace to its source. At around 2 in the afternoon, she walked through the third-floor waiting area on her way to a meeting and noticed the man in the quarter-zip pullover sitting very still with an untouched bag of pretzels. She stopped. "Is there anything I can get you?" she asked. "Are you waiting on someone?" Ellie looked up. "My father," he said. "Leon Navarro, room 318. He came in this morning. The doctors said they'd update me by noon, and—" He glanced at his watch. "It's been a while." Lynette pulled out her tablet, checked the system, and found Leon Navarro's file. "I'm so sorry for the delay," she said. "Dr. Ashworth is his cardiologist today, and she's had a full floor. I can go check personally and get you an update. I'd really appreciate that," Eli said. And then, because he was always paying attention, he added, "Is everything okay out here? You look like you've been putting out fires all morning." Lynette laughed, a short, surprised sound. "That's one way to put it," she said. She hesitated, then said, "We're having a software issue. Billing integration. It's been going on for a while, and we haven't been able to find the fix." Ellie looked at her. "What software?" "MedBridge 4.0, she said. "Do you know it?" He was quiet for a moment. "What's the integration issue specifically?" "The insurance verification module isn't talking to the claim system properly. Pre-auths are flagging as unverified even when they're confirmed on the payer side. IT thinks it's an API mapping issue, but they can't isolate where." A pause. "It's not the API," Eli said. Lynette looked at him. "MedBridge 4.0 has a known configuration error in the way it handles NPI number formatting when the payer taxonomy code is more than 10 characters, he said. "It truncates the field, so the verification request goes out correctly, but when the confirmation comes back, the system doesn't recognize it as a match because the ID string looks different on the return. It shows up as unverified even though it isn't." He reached into his jacket pocket and found a pen. She handed him a notepad from her tablet case. He wrote, "A FET for about 30 seconds, a sequence of steps, a configuration path, a specific field override. This is what the fix looks like," he said. "Your IT team need to go into the configuration panel, not the front end, the admin back end, and manually override the taxonomy field length cap. It's under System Settings, Payer Integration Advanced. Once they reset that flag and rerun the verification queue, everything that's been stuck should clear." He handed her the notepad. It should take about 20 minutes. Lynette looked at the notepad, then she looked at him. "How do you know this?" she said. Eli looked briefly at the bag of pretzels. "I built MedBridge," he said, "the first version. About 12 years ago. My company sold it. The current version is a few generations removed from what I wrote, but the underlying architecture is the same. That bug has been in there since version 2. For a long moment, Lynette didn't say anything. "You built MedBridge," she repeated. "The original?" "Yes." He paused. "I've been meaning to reach out to the current team about it. I didn't know it was still causing problems." Lynette looked down at the notepad. She looked at the man in the faded quarter-zip pullover with the bag of pretzels. She looked at the notepad again. "I'll be right back," she said. She went down to IT herself, which she did not usually do. She showed them the notepad. The senior IT technician, a man named Gerald, who had been working on this problem for 6 weeks, read the steps twice and then looked up at Lynette with an expression that suggested he was either going to be very grateful or very embarrassed, possibly both. It took 19 minutes. At 2:47 that afternoon, the billing integration system at Cascade Regional Medical Center came back online. The stuck verification queue cleared. The 3 patients with disputed pre-authorizations were confirmed. The software that had been causing problems for 18 months, that a $340,000 consulting firm had failed to fix, that IT had escalated twice to the administration. It was resolved by a man sitting in a waiting room eating vending machine pretzels because his dad was in room 318. Lynette went back to the waiting area at 3:02. Eli was on his phone now, which meant he was feeling better about things. He looked up when she came back. "Dr. Ashworth will be out in about 10 minutes, Lynette said. "Your father is stable. She has some good news for you." Eli exhaled, the kind of exhale that carries a long morning with it. "Thank you," he said. "No," Lynette said. "Thank you." She held up the notepad. Do you know what this means for us? For the patients we've had on hold?" "I'm glad it was simple," he said, and he meant it. She sat down in the chair across from him, which she also did not usually do, and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why were you just sitting here? You could have. I mean, if you'd said who you were, someone would have helped you." Ellie considered this for a moment. Outside the window, the afternoon light was going flat and grey, the way it does in Illinois in April. "My dad is what matters right now," he said, "not who I am." He paused. "And you helped me. Before you knew anything about me, that means more." Lynette was quiet for a moment. "We almost didn't help you quickly enough," she said. "I almost walked past, but you didn't," Eli said. She looked at him steadily. "You're being very gracious about something that wasn't gracious." Eli picked up the pretzels, offered her one. She declined. He ate one himself. "I've learned," he said, "that the way people treat you when they don't know who you are is the most honest information you'll ever get about them." He looked out the window. "You treated me like a person. That's not a low bar. It's just," he paused, "not always the one people clear." Dr. Ashworth came out at 3:15 with genuinely good news. The arrhythmia was manageable. Leon Navarro was going to be fine. She shook Eli's hand and told him his father could probably go home in 2 days with a medication adjustment and some monitoring instructions. Eli thanked her. He went in to see his father. Leon Navarro, 71, retired schoolteacher, was sitting up in bed looking irritated about the hospital gown and the fact that there was no good coffee to be had anywhere on this floor. He looked up when his son came in, and his expression did what it always did when he saw Eli, a complicated softening, the look of a man who was proud of something he didn't entirely know how to say. "Took you long enough," Leon said. "They had me waiting," Eli said. He pulled up the chair beside the bed. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm 62, Leon said, "which is how I felt this morning. I don't know what everyone's so excited about." Eli didn't say anything. He just sat there. The afternoon light came through the hospital window. Leon turned the TV on and then turned it off again. Leon said. "Yeah," Eli said. "Don't be," Leon said. "I'm not going anywhere." "I know." They sat for a while in the particular quiet of hospital rooms, which is different from all other kinds of quiet. Eventually, Leon said, without looking at him, "You fixed something while you were waiting out there. You had that look when you came in." Eli almost smiled. "The billing software." "Of course you did," Leon said. "The fix was in their system the whole time," Eli said. "They just didn't know where to look." Leon Navarro was quiet for a moment. He had been a high school math teacher for 33 years. He had raised Eli alone from the age of 9, after their mother died, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Pilsen on a teacher's salary. And he had watched his son build things. First in their apartment on a salvaged computer from a church sale, then in a series of increasingly serious settings for as long as he could remember. He had never entirely understood what Eli built, in the technical sense. But he had always understood why. "The fix was there the whole time," Leon repeated. "Yeah, that's usually how it goes." He looked at his son sitting in the chair beside his bed. The faded pullover, the calm face, the stillness that had always been there even when Eli was small. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Leon said. "What?" "All those rooms you walk into," he said. "All those people who see you and think, whatever they think, and then they find out." He shook his head slowly. "I wonder what that feels like for them." Ellie thought about Preston Whitfield's face across a glass table, thought about Lynette Burke's expression when she looked at the notepad, thought about the bank manager who had written the rejection letter he still kept in his drawer. "Mostly," he said. "I think they're surprised." "Do they apologize?" "Sometimes," Eli said. "Sometimes they don't. Either way, it doesn't change much." Leon looked at the window. "Your grandmother would have liked that answer," he said. "It was her answer," Eli said. Leon reached over and patted his son's arm, once, the way fathers do. Then he asked if there was any way to get a decent cup of coffee on this floor, and Eli said he'd find out, and he went and found out, and that was how they spent the rest of the afternoon. A father and a son, in a room with bad lighting and good news, talking about nothing much in particular. The billing system ran clean that night, and the next day, and every day after. 3 patients who had been waiting on authorization approvals got their paperwork within the hour. A woman in room 412 found out her procedure was covered after all, and cried with relief when the nurse told her. A family on the 2nd floor got a discharge summary they'd been waiting 4 days for. Small things. The kind of things that don't make the news. They made Leon Navarro's son smile, though, when Lynette texted him 2 days later to tell him. He was in another meeting by then, probably wearing a Henley. He texted back, "Really glad it helped." She texted, "The consulting firm is going to be very embarrassed." He texted, "Don't tell them it was me." She texted, "Too late. Gerald already looked you up." He put his phone away. He looked out the window of whatever room he was in, over whatever city, and thought about his father going home that morning in good spirits, thought about his grandmother's kitchen table, thought about the way Lynette had stopped instead of walking past. And there was a world of difference, he had come to believe, between people who looked at you and people who saw you. The world ran mostly on the first kind, but it was held together in the places that mattered by the second. He picked up his pen. He had work to do.